Hello, and welcome to LØRN Book Club. My name is Silvija Seres, and my guest today is Catharina Drejer, a friend and a PhD student at both High School for Leadership and Theology in Oslo and at Oslo Met. Welcome, Catharina.
Thank you.
Catharina, you are a social science person by background, if I understand correctly.
Yes.
And you wrote a book about slavery, slave tech, you called it, and that's going to be the center of this conversation. Maybe I should just add at the start of the conversation that we're going to do this in English. We could have done it in Norwegian. Your Norwegian is perfect, but the book is written in English, and it's probably opening it up for a larger audience if we have the conversation in English as we do. Is that
Definitely.
Okay?
Yes.
Good. So the book was published in 2018 by Frekk Forlag, same publishing company that does my state and date.
Yeah.
Start med datan. We are basically going to try to understand why did you write the book, and how did you write the book, and what was the effect of the book. Does that sound okay?
Yes, definitely.
So to begin with, would you mind saying just a few words about yourself? Who are you, and why do you care about slave tech?
Yeah, so I'm a Dutch person. I'm from the Netherlands, and it started there that I worked for a human rights organization, that I got into the topic of human trafficking and slavery. I was mostly working for the government, and I saw that, it was kind of led by a lot of NGOs doing really great work, but there was not much collaboration and not much innovation within the work. So I got really interested in, it's such an important topic. There is high numbers of people that are trafficked, enslaved around the world. So it basically affects all of us in some way. But it's it could maybe be interesting to research what kind of innovation is used in that field, because the later years, I heard that the word technology was then used a lot. Like, technology is going to change this field. Technology is going to abolish human trafficking. Technology this, technology that. And I was like, okay, what exactly is technology in these contexts? Like, what exactly is that word? So the book kind of started out in that I wanted to discover, what does technology mean in the context of human rights issues like slavery and human trafficking?
So we have a series in LØRN called Tech for Good, and we have tried to explore the area of technology in general, related to human rights, to fairness, to some of the sustainability goals that are social rather than climate and nature related. And one of the topics that keeps coming up is this ability to give people an ID. And there might be some blockchain technology related to that. And I didn't realize before how big a problem it is globally. It's, if I understand correctly, about 1 billion people without a proper formal ID. And so that's one area. But I remember you and I talked about this topic maybe 3-4 years ago, and it wasn't very clear. Is technology a bigger part of the problem that allows trafficking in these dark web channels, or is it actually a bigger part of the solution, which would allow the authorities and the NGOs to discover the illegal actions and stop them? So maybe I would like to start with asking you, what is the problem of slavery today? Somehow, we think that's something that happened more than 100 years ago, and we are kind of done with that problem. But your starting point is that it's actually not a solved problem.
No, that's true. So just to being clear on the definitions, because I use slavery and human trafficking a bit intertwined, but see the word slavery as like an umbrella term of human trafficking, forced labor. Those are means to be enslaved. So human trafficking I see as a means to get to a point where you are enslaved as a person, meaning that there's someone that's controlling you, that has all power over you, and you're not able to leave. That's like the definition of being enslaved. So it's not that you have bad circumstances and you have to work somewhere, but you can't leave. Like then you're technically not enslaved, even though you have a very bad situation. So
slavery, if I'm just trying to summarize it very briefly, it is really a situation where you have no control.
Exactly, you have no
over
choice.
your circumstances, no choice, and it could apply to women in relationships which are forced upon them. It can't apply to children, or can it? I mean, but let's say I'm forcing my kids to clean their rooms.
Yeah,
I'm not doing anything illegal.
No, you're not doing anything illegal. But one topic that I discuss in the book is sexual exploitation of children. And what we found is that a lot of times this is facilitated by the parents. So in this case, you can definitely speak of a type of enslavement where the child is forced to do things against their will. That is, of course, a crime, because it has to be a crime. So there is like a specific balance where you can definitely say that the child is enslaved, even though it's the parents that do that. So there is a fine line.
What about forced marriages, and what about child labor?
So those are definitely forms of modern slavery, as they say, because the child doesn't really have a choice to leave or to stop. And they are often forced to do way more than just to work. So it's very bad circumstances, yeah.
And forced marriage?
Also, that's also one of the kind of topics that you can place under that an umbrella term of modern slavery.
So what's the legal framework to stop this? Is there a global regulation that, for example, forbids forced marriage?
Yeah, so there's the Palermo Protocol. It's a protocol that's been set in place in the year 2000, and Norway is one of the countries that has ratified it, which means that they will not allow human trafficking to take place. They have to criminalize also, like they have to really prevent and protect. So there's like some legal parameters that they have to follow up on when they have then ratified this protocol. And this protocol has been ratified by many countries. So that's like internationally the most known protocol against human trafficking and slavery. And you see also that the law here in Norway is based on this protocol. So it's very well known, but it's still, of course, definitions are always difficult, and especially when they are used in different countries. And as you see with the use of technology, where the borders are often not in place, so it crosses borders digitally, you have to work together as countries. And there you see like a big problem, because even though you have ratified the same protocol, it might look different in your country to what you're then obliged to do. So it's a very challenging subject, and I think the digital part of it makes it even more challenging.
And so how big is the problem in the world? What do we estimate today in terms of numbers?
So today, if we talk about modern slavery, so including then all those other subjects I talked about, they estimate that there's about 40 million people in slavery today. And 1 in 4 of those people are children. So that's a lot of people. So the problem, is huge, but it's not that big that we can change it, I think.
So I guess there is also different countries have different cultural and social attitudes to some of this. I'm thinking especially some countries in recent wars, like the countries associated with IS, etc. do we have any ability to collaborate on these kinds of problems with countries that do not see this as illegal? Or I'm just trying to think: how do we enforce a global solution?
Yeah, well, I think it has a lot to do with awareness, but as you say, there are some cultural practices that make what we see as illegal is part of their culture, and it's part of how they have been doing things for a very long time. So I'm not sure if everyone would see that they would be doing something wrong. So I guess it's a lot of awareness raising and a lot of like human rights work, I think, first and foremost, to make people aware that they have rights. And that human rights are for everyone. So I think it starts a lot of the time there within the communities to make people aware so that they themselves can say, okay, wait, this is not right, even though my culture says it is okay. So I think a lot of the time it's not necessarily like governmental where it should start, but it should start with the people themselves and in the communities, and for them to realize like, wait, here's something not completely right, and I have rights to have it changed.
I just am thinking of a couple of talks I've heard at the Oslo Freedom Forum with young women that have revolted against forced marriages and tried to build awareness locally with the elders in the different cities, and that seems to be the thing that is working for them.
Yeah.
So this is a very kind of human condition that we're trying to solve by, being more human. So where does technology come in? And I would like you to help us understand both the good and the bad.
Yeah.
Because one of the problems that I see now is that, let's say, if it's the dark web and some of the stories that you hear there with child pornography happening on the other side of the world, but being financed by somebody in a rich country, who is the perpetrator, and how do you go about figuring out where this really comes from?
Yeah, so I think if you look at human trafficking and slavery, like the technology has it is good and it's bad. It's neither, but it's also not neutral. So whoever uses it will decide if it's a good thing or a bad thing. And I think in trafficking, mostly you see there is a lot of use of social media for grooming and contacting people. You see that also in the applications. A lot of the applications we use, like WhatsApp or TikTok or all the applications like Messenger, the really easy ones. Like I kind of came into writing this book thinking, because all I've heard is like the criminals are way ahead of us. They use these technologies. So I was expecting to find that these people, those criminals, had blockchain networks and cryptocurrency wallets and I don't know what, but no, they were just using WhatsApp. So that's one of the biggest revelations to me, is that, okay, of course there are some that are smart and use technology in a very smart way, but obviously most people are just using what is accessible. So it is those easy accessible apps, Skype, FaceTime, you name it, that are used to both like facilitate, but also to recruit people to work for them. For example, a lot of recruitment finds place on Facebook, social media platforms, where people are looking for jobs and false jobs are put out there. So you have that kind of recruitment. And then there's of course the sexual exploitation that takes place via Skype or FaceTime or those live stream applications, where it's also difficult to trace the evidence, because of course when you're done with the Skype, the evidence is gone if it's not recorded. So there is then those types of technology that are used to enforce human trafficking.
So Catharina, my impression is that what you're saying, okay, I know that some evidence is probably extremely hard to find. Some very few are very, very, very good at using the dark web. But most of the evidence, as you say, is actually blatantly obvious and very lightly covered up, or completely uncovered in some cases. But the problem is really the sheer scale of the things and the resources that the enforcement organizations actually have or don't have in order to follow up on all this?
Definitely. You see that this problem is getting so big, and the amounts of evidence, if you want to say it like that, like pictures and websites and videos, like the amounts of evidence are so big that law enforcement has no way to really adequately research a lot of the cases. And I think this is a problem that's just going to get bigger and bigger as we now are in lockdown. A lot of more people are in vulnerable situations at home. We are getting more digital during this time. So I think this problem will just increase. And so there is a big problem in resources there for law enforcement to really adequately address like the problem.
So is this a good opportunity for NGOs and the public sector to create maybe some platforms where volunteers can help?
Well, in the book, I say a bit about, there's a lot of technology used for good. There is people that are putting out applications where you can, for example, trace what kind of clothing you're buying, if that's fairly made, which of course has impact to people enslaved on the other side of the world, sewing clothing and having bad circumstances there. But so there's like a great use of such applications. But there's also some applications that are developed by NGOs that are a bit more, I would say that they're really good intentions because they want to, of course, help people and they want to collect information to have better understanding of the problem. But what you get is that there's so much data collected and it's so sporadically done by people that don't really know the field. So it's like volunteers or people that are just interested that are trying to help. So what you get is a very blurred picture of reality because it's just bits and pieces. And I think since we are talking about victims that are not going to be victims their whole lives, they're going to survive and move on and hopefully find a great life for themselves with a job and a family or whatever they want. But it's important that we take that into account when we collect data, but also when we create technologies, that it will not be data that's lingering online. And I think this has been one of those big issues within digital idea. Who's gonna keep that data? Because it's very sensitive information. So even though the solution, it sounds amazing, and of course everyone should have a digital idea because this can really change the picture of the people who have access to their own personal data. But as long as blockchain is not worldwide implemented, for example, then we still have somebody that's going to collect this data, and it will be centralized somewhere. So what and who is going to be that, and what are they going to do to secure the data?
But I think that this problem about data ownership and management is what shall I say, Catharina? It's a tough problem, but it's ours to solve, because while the public sector is thinking that they are being very wise when they say that we have to think, we have to stop, we have to be very careful about how we do this, the big digital companies are actually solving the problem. So while we say let's stop and think, the others just say, well, let's just solve the shit out of this thing. And the problem is that then there is even more centralization of this kind of data as well in private hands. And no matter how well-intentioned those private hands are, which I believe they are super well-intentioned, it's still politically, I think, incorrect to place that kind of power and responsibility into not democratically elected authorities.
Agreed.
And so, it's more almost like you're putting powers in their hands that they are not elected or suited to have, not because, they are the smartest people in the world, I believe, but still, and it's because, or as long as the public sector doesn't take on responsibility for managing this problem, somebody else will, because it's a big problem and needs to be solved. And it's a similar problem like with health data. We can wait and see and delay until we figure out all the privacy issues with health data. In the meantime, people die. because we don't share the data for research and for diagnostics and so on. So it's a very difficult prioritization. It's similar to what we're doing now with the vaccines, and reopening of the society. It's about how do you get to the goal in a safe enough, fast enough way where those two things are a little bit in contrast with each other.
Exactly, yeah. And I think it's a good point with the fast enough, because like you say, we can't wait. We can't wait for too long for the technology to have perfected itself to be used. Like, we kind of have to work with it and adjust. But it is so difficult, because these are people that are already in a sensitive situation, in like a vulnerable situation. So if anything goes wrong, they will have the least means to do anything about it. If it's like us that live in Norway, that have jobs, that are aware of our rights, if it's us that it's tested on, I think we are more capable with the resources we have to maybe do something about it. But I think somebody that is not so aware of their own human rights and doesn't really know the technology will not. And that's, of course, that balance there of how you're going to solve that.
Mm. No, I think it's very, very interesting. I have spoken with a couple of companies I want to mention to you, and I would like to hear more of your examples. So one company is, Norway has some really interesting AI research, and it was applied on visual and other kinds of biometric user interfaces. So one application, it's a research project, is looking at the way people type, and using that to classify people. They can recognize people who are grooming. By not what they type, but how they type. And then the big dilemma is, how can this data be kept in a safe way? And who should be able to have access to this data? Keeping in mind that even though you're very effective, there could be some false positives. And, so it's the dilemma that way as well. And then the other really interesting one was where, people are using now images more and more for visual identification. But you can do morphing, and you can combine people's faces, and that can be used for illegal access to both services and countries. And there is a company that can deal with this kind of manipulation of images really, really well. So both of these are related to ID kind of challenges. I don't know what your favorite positive possibilities in technology are.
Well, I think there's a very easy one in a way, and that's just if you look at the communities where there's a risk of people being quite vulnerable, I think a very easy one is digital education. It's so simple that it's almost like overlooked, because I think we're always looking to like the newest technology.
The hardest,
but I think I interviewed Roya Mahbub, and she is from Afghanistan, and you probably know her. So she is doing a digital literacy project in her own community, helping young women to get an education, but not just as like not sewing or something that often is done to help women out of a difficult situation, but coding and programming and like really the technology side of it, to make people like digital citizens. And I think that is quite an easy example, even though the work is not easy, but it's not so high tech to say like that. That can really make a big difference. It's just that education part. So that's actually one of my favorite examples of how technology can be used to create more like empowerment among people, is to really educate them digitally, that there is a world out there, a digital world that they can be part of. So I think that's one of my favorites.
Agreed. Catharina, what's your main goal with the book? Why did you want to write this book?
I wanted to write it because mostly I was interested myself in what people would put into technology, because it's a buzzword. It's kind of like an NGO word that's now used a lot to find solutions for all kinds of human rights issues, but especially here in human trafficking. So it's just interesting, like, what does it mean? And what really does it mean? Because technology can be anything. And I think to create awareness on maybe a bit the ethical side of when we're developing technology, that those that are in NGOs that feel like it's an easy solution to create an app for something that's not always thought through in how to store data or what kind of impact it will have on the survivor later on. So I think those topics were something that I really wanted to look into. And I think lastly, I talked to some people that survived after they have been enslaved. And I learned that they had fantastic ideas themselves in how to prevent people from getting into the same situation using technology. So for me, it was also to really create like a platform for them to share their stories and to also give their wisdom and kind of that they have learned and share it with the rest of the NGOs and the people that work in kind of that anti-slavery field, because they carry so much knowledge and have great solutions that are way simpler often that we could think of. So I think that's a big.
What are some examples? You
So
know, what could be a way to avoid becoming enslaved, if there are one or two kind of really good ideas?
Well, this guy, I talked to two men that were in a situation here in Norway, and they got out after they've been kind of stuck without their passports or anything. They got out, and I interviewed them, not necessarily about their story, because, it doesn't matter how they got enslaved, but more to think a bit about solutions for other people like them that are looking for a job and better work experience and better money to send home. So I talked to them about solutions, and they said, well, our people are often on these social media platforms to connect with one another, and that's where we look for jobs. So they said, like, why, if Facebook or if anyone would put out like a prevention video or like make us aware of that this is happening, then I think a lot of people would be helped by that, which is of course a very easy solution in a Facebook group. So I think, like, he said, yeah, you can develop an app, but he's like, most of us don't have iPhones, so we would never be downloading any app. And he's like, I did not know I was enslaved or that I was being trafficked. So he's like, yeah, I would never look up my rights online because I didn't know I was trafficked. So I didn't know I was in a bad situation until it got bad. And then it was, of course, too late. You're not going to Google UDI to looking at your working rights when you're already in a situation where you have no choice. So I thought it was a revelation in a way, where I'm like, we should pay more attention to people that have really suffered through this and hear what they have to say. And
can I just ask you a legal question? Because basically most of us know so incredibly little about this, and shamefully little about this. And I think the people who are in this difficult situation know the least. But if they find themselves in a position like that, in one of the properly regulated countries, is it possible to simply find a policeman and say that I am being trafficked? And you know, I mean, it's not their fault.
No. Well, and that's a bit the issue here in Norway, I think, is that for a long time, the victims have been seen as sort of an offender themselves. So a lot of them have not dared to go to the police because they often get sent back home. And that's also not what they want. So it is, of course, it's a very difficult and delicate situation, but there are some organizations here in Norway that can at least help with providing rights and even looking into the case to see, okay, are you trafficked or not, and what can we do for you? So that there's just an extra person with that person that's exploited to make sure, their rights are being honored, because they do have rights here in Norway.
But I mean, their rights are to be free, but they still don't have the right to illegally immigrate to Norway.
That's true.
So I guess, and this is probably where it gets very political, but basically, it should be also the social requirement that you don't willingly participate in something that encourages slavery by wanting to illegally immigrate.
Yeah, and that's what they now do, for example, at airports, like those kind of places where people come in to work. That's where they now raise awareness. So there's a lot of work being done to kind of target those groups. But I think, like, coming back to technology, we can use those kind of social media groups way more to to raise awareness about what is the problem. Because these two men I talked about, they had a contract, like they were here legally, as far as I understood. So they were misled, you know, and that happens also. So it's a fine line between those that feel that there are some people also that don't mind the exploitation because it's better than they had at home. So there is a lot of difficulty there in finding solutions also for people that need help, and some people don't want help. So there is that fine balance again of finding solutions for the right groups, because there's no technology that fits all, and there's also not such solutions against human rights issues that fits all groups. You have to kind of look particular at the issue and try to target that in a way that fits.
So another question I have for you, Catharina, is I guess Pareto principle, where the 20% of the effort gives you 80% of the returns, might apply here as well. I imagine that there are some places where people are there are hotbeds of exploitation, and that maybe if we found a way to deal with those somehow efficiently first, it could solve much of the problem. And I'm thinking especially where children are involved. If you were to, so we talked about digital education and literacy, but if you were to try to give advice at the global level, what do you think we should start with?
Well, I think there has to become a bigger focus on like these live stream applications and these live stream functions of recording imagery, because if you look at the survivor, if a child survives, the material will be online, and it's very hard to get everything off, and especially because everything is copied and distributed in all kinds of channels. So it's a huge problem that you can be rescued from exploitation and slavery, but you will never be really free from it because it's always out there online. So the pressure for a victim or a survivor then is huge. So I think we have to take that more serious, and I guess with more serious I mean that we should maybe have more resources available for that particular problem, because it involves young children, it happens in the home. There's a very low standard for getting access to all of that material. You can do that from your own living room if you want. So and I think I just recently published an article about that it happens a lot with the work computer, and so it's the most private device people have. So a lot of the material is downloaded on a work computer. So there's also a part there that arbeidsgiver, like employers can really try to look into their company and how they regulate that, or how they deal with that, because it's a huge problem and it infiltrates all parts of society.
Catharina, who do you hope reads the book?
I do hope that I guess like politicians would read the book that are like involved in the developmental work, but also in work here in Norway that is on human trafficking and human rights, because I think this technology part has to really be more enforced, and the work against that child online exploitation, because children are so vulnerable, and it's our responsibility to protect and to take care of them. So I think we will have to find better ways to deal with that, and to deal with it quicker. So I think if politicians that create laws, or like at least discuss them, if they could read this book and take that into account, I think that would be a good start.
Would you say that also parents could do something more in order to protect their children from digital slavery that you talked about?
Well, definitely, and not, of course, all grooming leads to human trafficking, and not all everything leads to slavery. But you can see slavery also as a part where you feel enslaved because your information is out online forever, like a picture you've shared. Like that's of course legally not slavery, but it is a type of enslavement. It's something you can get off. So I think for parents, it's extremely important to take that into account, and for them to to look at their child and see how are you doing. Make this like discuss this. Ask them about it. How do you navigate online? Ask for help also, because a lot of people are a bit like hands off of, Snapchat's nothing for me. I don't understand it. It's for my kids. But I think as parents we have this obligation to understand that world, because it is their world. It's the world of the child right now. So we have to engage in that. And I think to follow up and look also for signs if your child is really withdrawn, or if they're going to be secretive, and if their moods change and you see it's connected to their phone, or there's always an opening there to ask, like, hey, how are you doing? Like, what are you doing online? Can you show me? And be like wanting to learn from them. I think that's a good starting point, because of course, with sexual online exploitation, we focus a lot on the Philippines, for example, or like these hotspots, as they call them. But I don't think it's. I think it's very underreported. It might happen here as well, and if it's not happening here, it will in the future. So I think we have to become very aware of what we let our children do online, and follow up on them and be interested in their lives, so that they also dare to come to you if they have shared something that they shouldn't have shared, or that they are feeling that open connection to talk about it. I think it's important.
I'm going to read a quote from your book, Catharina, that I really like as well.
Mm-hmm.
You say, for too long, advocates have tried to solve problems while forgetting those who carry the solutions, those who have suffered yet have survived.
Mm.
So you're saying that we should also, as you also have done yourself, talk more to people who have been in the situation, rather than thinking from our ivory towers and asking them for what they think would be the best solutions for them.
Definitely. And it's the same with children, I think, that are not necessarily exploited. I think you can also ask them, so what do you need? How can we make this a safer place for you? How can we, as a parent, like, how can I protect you there? Like, what do you need? I think it's a good way to ask questions and to be interested, because a lot of times you'll be surprised, I think, with the answers you get.
My last question, Catharina. So you started the project, I think, 5 years ago. The book came out 3 years ago. Are you more optimistic or pessimistic at the moment?
I'm always optimistic. I think a lot of people are doing a lot of great things. So I think we should focus on that, and we should try to develop those good things. And we should also not all wanting to do our own things, but maybe add to those that are already doing good stuff. And I think then we can get far. And we're learning, and we're just having to keep learning.
We are definitely learning.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
And it was a pleasure talking to you again, Catharina. Thanks for a wonderful book, and thank you for participating in a LØRN book club.
Thank you so much.